Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Let Me Ask You This podcast. I am your host, Ebie Hepworth, and I am so grateful that you're here. I start every single episode off by saying this, and I want you to know I truly, truly mean it. Thank you for being here. You could be anywhere in the entire world, and you're choosing to be here. And I want you to know I don't take it lightly. What a gift it is to be here with you today. Today's guest is a man whose craft honestly feels like it was stitched in eternity. Jake Weidmann. Jake is only one of 7 master penmen in the world, and it's a title that honestly speaks to his breathtaking artistry, his deep reverence for beauty, and it goes so beyond ink and paper and carving and all of the different expressions of what his art looks like. He is such a wonderful and remarkable man. He is a husband to my dear friend Hannah, who is on the podcast of season 2, which I will include in the show notes because her episode marked me in such a special way. Her life marks me. But I know if you're listening to this episode and you're struck by Jake, then I know that you will be so struck by my dear friend Hannah. But in this episode, we just sit down and we unpack Jake's newest book, Old Soul, New Creation, and it is preparing to be released this upcoming week. It is a sacred offering, let me tell you. It is part testimony, but part invitation. It is something that draws readers into a deeper understanding of identity and creativity, and specifically about the God who forms us. And Jake, he shares all about what led him to write this book, what surprised him in the process, and just how surrender has sharpened not only his pen, but his purpose. And so, gosh, this conversation, it's so much more than just about art. It's about calling, it's about legacy, it's about the fingerprints of God on the different pages of our life. And so without further ado, here is my episode with my friend Jake Weidmann. Well, welcome, Jake. How are you today, my friend?
Oh, I am so good, Ebie. It is so wonderful to be with you. There's like this great line. I think it's from the movie Emma, where she says Ebie Hepworth. It's like, it's a name I know so well as my own. So long have I heard it spoken. And so it's like, I've heard your name spoken so many times around our house. I get, Hannah always has me listen in on your little voice messages back and forth.
Oh, our podcast,
so
we like to call them because
yes.
Hannah and I.
You have your own personal podcast going on.
Oh
Absolutely.
my goodness, Jake, the way that your wife has been a gift to me in this season of my life. I mean, truly, it's a prayer answered that I've been praying for years, in the sense of just what she carries and the way that she's so remarkable. Every single, just the crumbs, the shadows, everything, I have learned so much from her. So thank you for sharing your lovely life with me.
I know that sentiment is absolutely mutual. I mean, she absolutely adores you, and you are such an encouragement and answer to prayer, too. So, it's wonderful. So it's great now that I get to kind of
now this is real. And then the next thing, I've already told my husband this summer, fall, at some point, once you guys are out of the full postpartum blurry, Zach and I are driving our huge tribe of a family over to Colorado, and we are going to connect with you guys. I think once you and Zach meet, it's just game over because you're artists in such different ways. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, will you tell us a little bit about where you come from, a little bit about what you spend your days doing, and just your heart behind that?
Yeah, where I come from. You know what? I've grown up in Colorado pretty much all my life, except for my stint at college at Biola University was the only extended period of time I've spent away from home. And so, I've always loved Colorado, and enjoyed being here, and really believe in blooming where you've been planted. And that it's been really fun to really sow seeds and grow a family here, and really awesome. Even though my wife and we have a little bit of an age gap, but it's like we grew up. I always say that our age gap is 8 years, but our homes are only 5 minutes apart. So I say we're 8 years and 5 minutes apart, and that was enough to not know each other most of the time growing up, but we had so many shared experiences sort of parallel in our different avenues of time. And so that's been that's been really great. It's a really wonderful place to be, and to establish like more roots here, and build our own home, and also like being able to work from home, which I do,
Mm,
and that has its own challenges that we may get into. Um,
totally.
but yeah, it's been a uh, good place to be rooted. And then what I fill my days with, you know what, Evie, that's a
Question of the
running
century.
question. Yeah.
Every
Uh,
day's different. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, especially because 'cause we're dealing with, we have 3 young kids at home, another one on the way, and so, it's a question I often ask myself, "What do I fill my days with?" I mean, there are times I come in, like, having dealing with, we're juggling the kids or
Right.
whatever, and,
Right.
the home responsibilities, and, like, I look at Hannah and I'm like, sometimes I work. There are
Yeah.
sometimes that I actually make a living, and do some art on the side. But yeah, so I guess it depends. By and large, I try and like sit to like a really good, production schedule as far as like the different like commissions that I have going on. The past couple of years, what has been new in the mix of doing like jewelry design, and carving or painting, all of that, and like the new part of that has been the writing aspect. And
Mm.
I was reached out, to write, this first book, um, but HarperCollins actually wanted to do a 2-book deal, and so I was like, "Great, that
Yeah.
sounds awesome. Let's bundle them up."
Sure.
And so we haven't quite launched the first book, and they're already like, "Okay, let's get started on the second." I was like, "Are you kidding? Can I come up for
Perfect
air for
timing
a
while I have a
second?"
baby. Let's do this.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, my days are full. Whatever I'm doing, the days
Yes.
are very full, and it's usually a pretty eclectic mix of
Yeah.
different things. So, by and large, I'd say I'm spending the majority of my time on my primary like commission right now, which is a massive wood sculpture, and so it's carving all of these individual pieces. It'll probably be like 20 different pieces that'll be assembled into one. So you'll carve them individually and then bring them together in this sort of assemblage fashion of
Oh my goodness.
merging them all together to create this grand family crest.
I have
So,
a feeling in 15 years we're going to be watching. You know how have you and Hannah ever watched Chef's Table on Netflix?
oh yeah, absolutely, great
Okay,
show.
so just this beautiful they tell the story through video so beautifully of how all these chefs
Yes.
and I have a feeling in like 10 years we're going to be watching just like that version but in art and we're going to be like I can't believe the Jake Weidmann look at the process, look at the school like just like being able to, film and tell the story of how you create. Like it's going to
Yeah,
be
I don't
epic.
know. I mean, I don't know if it's as like juicy and beautiful as like some of those like, unbelievable Michelin star rated like chef's kitchens. It's like I'm
But,
creating in my
I think
garage.
it brings a nutrients to the spirit that we're hungry
Mm,
for, but we don't even know that the appetite is there yet because we haven't tried it.
yeah.
So I
Wow.
think art and
Good
that's what
word.
you're so gifted at doing is you're great at stirring the appetite of the deep artist within people.
Mm,
And so I'm so excited to read your book. I already pre-ordered it, but I want to talk about your new book. Well, actually, let me backtrack. I have this question and I wrote it down. I didn't send it to you, but I've always wanted to
yes.
ask you this. Of
Okay.
all the different types of art, your penmen
Mm.
and your carving and all of these different expressions, do you have one that you feel like is like, this I am alive doing?
Oh gosh, like I get asked this question actually quite a bit,
I'm sure.
and I say like it's sort of like, asking me to pick a favorite kid,
Yeah.
It's just
Such
it's
a
so
savage question, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's so difficult for me to really choose and say, this one I wanna do
Yes.
for the rest of
Yes.
my life, and, like, if I had to narrow it down, and
Mhm.
it's like I dare not even answer that for myself because I love all of them, and
Totally.
what's really beautiful, and I think what has actually been a huge help for me as a professional artist, because I was warned when I got into this, like, Jake, you're settling into a professional career as an artist.
Yeah.
You really got to watch out for burnout, because it's like,
Right.
if you're always at the grind and you're always doing things, then you're going to wear yourself out. And you could rob the joy out of your passion by having to
Right.
always do it to make ends meet. And I'd say, like, because I am like multidisciplinarian, because I have so many different mediums that I am interested in and love doing, that you know uh I think that that's really, it freshens the pot, whereas like when I
Yes.
get
You're never
when I
bored.
yeah, exactly. It's like I'll work for a long time on, say, like an illuminated calligraphic manuscript piece, and like pour myself into that. And by the time that I'm like finishing up and I'm pretty tired with that, it's time to move on to, like, a beautiful drawing or a
Right.
painting. And
Right.
then by the time I'm tired of like living in the two-dimensional world, I get commissioned to do a massive
Yeah.
carving like I am right
Yeah.
now. And it just keeps me coming around, and it's like
Yeah.
I get quality time with each one of my
Yeah.
kids, so to
Yeah.
speak. And so that's been really refreshing. I'm sure by the time I get to the end of this wood carving, I might be a little bit burnout.
Yeah. Ready to, yeah, ready to press pause on carving.
Yeah,
How long will
yeah.
that take you from start to finish, do you think?
This has been my longest, or will be my longest commission. I've been working on it, just this section of it, because I did the 2D section, and I worked on that for about a year. And that was all stippling and just
Wow.
drawing it two-dimensionally on calfskin vellum.
Right.
And so that was like, that was developing the sketch, the design, and then executing the full piece. So
Wow.
that took a great deal of time. So that was a year just on that. I'm
Oh my
in
goodness.
And then, so moving on to phase 2, which is the sculpture, I'm already a year into that, and I'll probably be and I have about another year to go. So I mean, if you were to group it all together, it's 1 year spent on this family crest, doing it in the 2D and the 3D. If you're just focusing on the 3D, then that's 2 years of carving, pretty much
Wild.
solidly. So, um, and I say pretty much solidly. I'm still doing like jewelry design for
Right.
Everyday
Right.
Heirloom alongside
Right.
Hannah, and all of the graphics that go along with that.
Yes.
I wrote a book during, phase 1 of the family
I
crest,
am
and I'm gonna write.
so tired thinking about all this, Jake. I want to take a nap just thinking
I
about all the
I
things
am
you've been.
too. I am too. I am several naps behind at this point. So,
All right. Well, let's jump into your book because I'm so pumped about it. The title, just brilliant. Like, I'm always on the edge of my seat with your family of just what's being breathed out of it. And so, this specific title, Old Soul, New
yeah.
Creation, it holds this really beautiful tension, right? It's the idea of carrying ancient wisdom while being made new. What does that phrase mean to you, that title?
Oh gosh.
And
I'll
kind of
say,
how did your heart get shaped as you began writing it?
it was, I mean, we were sort of digging the tunnel from both ends, because we hadn't landed on a title at the outset of the book. And so, which I think, like, in hindsight, was really good, because
Mm,
there were some really great titles that were thrown out there in the beginning, and none of them really felt like home. I mean, they all kind of, they were pretty and they worked okay, but none felt like truly original. I think there were a couple
yeah.
that my publisher recommended, and I like look them up, and I'm like, there's already like 5 books by that title, and they're like,
Yeah.
don't worry about it, you're in your own category, it'll still work.
Yeah.
And I was like, as an artist, that drives me crazy, first of all.
Totally. I was just gonna
And
say that.
yeah, I'm like, I need it to be original. It's like, I
100%.
I need this to be like, if I'm gonna chart out and do something, I really need it to be original. I need it to be mine.
Yeah.
And so that was like, it was good that we didn't settle on a title, like, right away, because the writing of the book really took on a life of its own. And
Mm.
at first, like, my publisher, like, I thought we were going to go into really extensive planning sessions and all of these things. And that never really happened. They were just like, "Here you go. Go write your book." And,
Yeah.
we had it scoped out, obviously, in, like, the proposal of what I was gonna write. And so I just started, like, I wrote my first draft of the manuscript and submitted it, and they were like, "Okay, it's good. You're getting a little bit into the teaching mode. We wanna hear more about the personal side, and we're gonna connect you to this editor that we work with, like, all the time, and he's really brilliant. He's a professor out of Canada. He's got his doctorate in medieval history." So I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
man,
come
well,
on.
we're gonna get on like a house on fire because
Yeah.
this is great." And we did. I mean, we were talking about, the early church fathers and the glories of
Oh,
vellum and ancient manuscripts. I mean, it was really, really great. But what he said, 'cause I was like, for my first book, I didn't want it to be the Jake show, I didn't want it to be all about
a
me. I didn't
memoir.
want it to be
Yeah.
this. Yeah, exactly. And so I was, like, really shying away from it. And,
Mhm.
but he said something. He's like, "Jake," he's like, "I want you to think of, like, Saint Augustine's Confessions." It's like,
Ooh.
here you had this man who was, like, he was the head of rhetoric in Milan, for the church. And he wrote these confessions that were incredibly transparent. He's talking about,
Mm.
his earliest, like, memories of sins as a boy, like stealing
Yeah.
pears from his neighbor's tree when he was not in need of any pears. And so it's just really, it was really beautiful and transparent. He's like, "That's what I want you to like lean into. That's what I like,
Mm.
how I want you to approach the book." And I was like, "Great, Steve, no small bar there. Like, do it like Saint Augustine." you know? But, like, what he did say, he's like, "Jake, where your writing comes alive is where you're speaking from personal story. And that's an
Mm.
opportunity for the readers to connect with you, because it's like right
Mm.
now we see all of your beautiful art and we see, like, all the things that you can do, but, like, where's the real heart behind that?"
Yes.
And so he's like, "I wanna challenge you to be more transparent, to lean into your story." And like St. Augustine's story, he said, even though it was about him, he says it was very clear from the outset that he was not the ultimate hero of his story, that
Mm.
was ultimately God. And he's like, that is the truth of your story, is that God is the hero in your story. God is the
Yeah.
hero working through all of your art pieces to transform you as his creation. And so I was like, okay, that's a great
That's it,
reframing.
Steve.
So,
Thank you, thank you,
yep.
thank you. Mic
So
drop,
then,
Steve.
yes, exactly. And so then it did, it does take on a little bit more of, like, a personal memoir like style, but where that essentially frames out, uh
Pointing to the one.
yes, absolutely. And so I was like, in that way, it was like the title sort of birthed out of that. And,
Mm.
as I've looked back at my own story, and I've always had this attraction to things that are old and ancient. Every single one of the art forms that I do,
Yeah.
are were thankfully a lot of them are being revived. But a lot of them were sort of like lost and or dying art forms. And so it was a really, um it was like, that kind of rounded out, like, kind of the old soul aspect of it. But,
Mm.
seeing how God was working through me as I engaged with him in the creation process is like, he was making, a new creation of me. And
Mm.
and that was like, so, that felt like this beautiful sort of like, duality to what was actually going on in my story, and helped frame it out. And that's how we came upon the title.
That's wild. Isn't it wild how as you're learning how to extract your story, that you're given
Mm,
language from other people in that way of like, I mean, yeah, even the genesis of how you would create that title, right? Like you didn't think
yes.
10 years ago, oh yeah, I'm an old soul, new creation necessarily. But as you're putting your story onto paper, that
Yeah.
is what's coming alive to you. And like you said, ultimately it's pointing to Jesus, that you're a
Yeah.
new creation because of
Right.
him, right?
Yeah. And that was like, and it was something that we really pushed back on, and like really pushed with with the publisher, and thankfully they were very gracious. I was
Totally.
like, it was a lot of fear for nothing, but I was like, oh gosh, I hope they're gonna like this title. I hope they're not
Yeah.
gonna reject it, because it was like, I remember the day that I told it to Hannah, I was like, wait, I was like, what do you think about Old
Yeah.
Soul, New Creation? And her back was like towards me at that moment. I think she was dealing with something with the kids, but she turned around and she's like, I love it.
Yes. Yes.
And so it is something where it's like, when we were hunting for our home, it's like everybody says, like, you'll know once you walk in the door
Yes.
that it's home. And so the same thing, it was like once we stepped through the threshold on this title, it was like,
Mhm.
we're home. This is it. And then, there's another, given the fact that I was also like creating a whole art piece around it,
Right.
meant that I really, here I'm set up to spend like tens of hours, drawing and laboring over this book cover, because I want it to be like, this first entry point into all of my art and all of my writing.
Yes.
Yeah. For
Yes.
my first book. So I was like, it has to be just like bang on. So that, that really kind of helped start changing things. And even as I was sketching out a whole bunch of different concepts for the book cover, um, that too, like kind of started shaping itself out as to what the cover was going to look like. Even down to
Which
like,
is just epic, by the way.
oh, thank you.
Oh my goodness. It's the kind that you don't even need to know what it's about. You look at it and you're like, "I'm reading that. Done."
Well, good. I mean, that is the hope. And I mean, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but hopefully in this case people do. 'Cause
For
it's like I
sure.
brought my best foot forward, and it's like I'm
Totally.
definitely new to the writing game, but
Yeah,
it's like, you know, at least I know some of more about art, so, hopefully
for
people
sure.
buy it, if nothing else, just to decorate their bookshelves. So,
Oh,
um,
well, I know the heartbeat of what's within and just scribed on the inside is gonna, I mean, it's
mm,
such an offering. So, I'm so, so excited to read it. Um, something you talk a lot about is that how craftsmanship and artistry, how it demands patience, precision, and you
mm,
have a reverence specifically for tradition, which it sounds like
yeah,
you've always been that way from even a little boy. And it's even would
yes,
make sense why a publisher would say, hey, we want to connect you with this type of professor because he honors tradition, right?
yes,
And so that's something very rare in our microwavable Christianity world, our microwavable just culture of just fast now, go. And so, how has practicing this discipline of patience, precision, reverence for tradition, how has that discipline shaped your own soul? And would you
mm.
say that it could be kind of a form of spiritual formation?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there is, you know, there is there is something of like of ritual and spiritual practice just to the
Mm,
disciplines that I do. And, like that, for instance, like the tradition of a master penman, though it was born of like American heritage handwriting, that specific title, the disciplines that I've learned reach back to the ancient scribes. And
mm.
like they were the illuminators. And the illuminators, they called themselves that because they were, on the one hand, they were writing these beautiful manuscripts, and like these were men of the cloth who devoted their life to this art form, to essentially bring the light of truth into the world, through the written word. And so in that sense, it was like they were illuminating the world with truth, and they were illuminating the word with light, as well, because they were using things like gold leaf and lapis lazuli, these precious, gems and minerals and materials
Wow.
to illuminate the word, and hold the light on the page. And even, they used cast shadow a lot, and cast shadow was not just a stylistic thing, it was to say that the light of God was permanently on the page. And so, kind of like it says
Oh, wow.
in James, it talks about the father of the lights, and not a shadow can be moved, because he is the father of light. So too, that shadow would be permanent on the page. And so I think, the deeper you drive, not into, n- only the execution the discipline, but really understanding the why behind it. It's like it draws you into this deeper relationship with God, and a fellowship with all of these past creators, all of these men and women who through the ages like exemplified their faith, on the page through their art. And it's like you're following in their pen strokes, you're following in their brush strokes, and it's like that's marked out for you in this way that is like deeply faithful, and in a way that is like integrated into their daily lives. And so to me, it is a challenge, to me personally, to carry that on in every aspect of artwork that I do.
Yeah. Well, especially in the artwork of a book, right? Because it's not like,
Mm,
you want the craftsmanship demands this patience, and you want everything that is coming from your hands and heart to be breathed on and to be oily with his
yes,
glory, right? But then somebody
absolutely.
says, hey, we need your manuscript in 6 months, or a commission piece says, hey, I need this family crest by 2027, and then you're like, so that's the tension as an artist or as a human, man, just where you're like, Lord, how do I have this reverence for the way you want to do this with me while also honoring a timeline, because like real art is a long and slow process. And
Yeah.
so
Well, and
it's just a
actually,
dance.
absolutely. And I mean, I made, by and large, you can kind of build it in, and like the people who commission you, like I've been very, very blessed that, the people who commission like high end art pieces, they understand.
Yeah, they're
And like,
aware of the
and that's the
sacredness.
reason why they're coming to me, is because they're like, they respect the work, and they know that it's like, it's not like ordering a pizza. It's like you don't get a discount if it arrives 30 minutes late. It's like this is lasting art. And so it's like the more time that I take on it, the higher return they're going to get, because it's like I'm
Yes.
pouring myself in. So by and large, the people who commission the artwork are extremely patient. The publishers, they want to stick to a dedeadline, and I on and two, like I wanted to honor that as
Yes.
well.
Of
uh
course.
and I made him really nervous, because like at the start of my book was when AI started coming out with all of these language models, and AI art was like really making a lot of artists nervous, and I was having to speak on it and
Oh,
everything,
wow.
do a lot of research. And so there, and in the publishing world, there was like all this like talk of, well, how do you stop somebody just entering a prompt into a computer, and then
Right.
it's like they can spit out, like Chat GPT
A
could
New
spit
York
out
Times
an entire
bestseller
book.
just right
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. So I kind of took I took this like kind of radical, rebellious approach. I was like, you know what? I'm going to write my entire manuscript longhand. And not only is it going to be longhand, but it's going to be in Spencerian script. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
like very few people know, and there is actually like there's a page inside the book, where it has my concept sketch of the cover, and then behind it is actually one of my handwritten manuscript pages, from the first phase. Now,
So Saint Augustine of you.
oh yeah, right. Well, I mean, I was like, why is this that big of a deal? I mean, so many people like, if Melville could write his like epic in by
Sure.
hand, and then it's like,
Yeah.
why can't I? And it's like, and
That's
that was
awesome.
something. So it was sort of this rebellious thing, this analog artist in this digital age that's being just absolutely overtaken by AI. I was like, this will be my first book. Is it going to be the very best book ever written? No, probably not, but every single word in this book will be my word, and I can prove it by the ink on the page. And
Mm.
and so that was good to like stand on for like the first draft, but then very quickly they're like, "Great, but we need this,
Yeah.
transcribed into like Word so we can track changes and do all the like things." And
That is
so
like the ultimate artist flex, like that you like hand wrote a manuscript.
well, and honestly, like my editor, from the get-go, like she saw some of the earlier pages, and she goes, what if we printed the entire book like actually in your handwriting? And I was like, that's a great idea. My heart is leaping at the thought of
Yes,
that.
I'm
Yeah.
honored.
But, I think, like, Spencerian script, especially has a lot of letter forms that are a bit antiquated to the modern
Sure.
eye. So I think people would struggle to be able to read it. It's like what
Yeah.
they say, like, cursive is a secret language that the old people will use to evade the young, because
Oh,
it's
I
like
love
so
that.
many people so many few, kids nowadays understand cursive,
Oh, that's
but
awesome.
anyways, that might be for a future book, and, maybe when I'm a more skilled writer and I don't have to go back and make so many edits,
Sure, sure.
yeah.
Well, there going on that, obviously riffing off of that, you put your pen to paper, and when ink meets paper, there's a sacredness about it, right? And
Absolutely.
words that are permanently etched into things that you're carving. And so, in Old Soul, New Creation, how do you see God as the ultimate artist? And how has your own journey mirrored the idea of being rewritten and reformed by his hand?
Mm, wow, such a good question. You know, from like For me personally, like, I think the opportunity to write a book, as daunting as it was in the beginning, was such a gift in the end, because it was an opportunity for me to go back and to recall all the different ways that God was at work in my life, in
Mm,
way, and at times where it's like I I I didn't immediately see him there. I might have been blinded by my own fears in the midst of that moment. I might have been, just trying to focus on how to get through that phase, but didn't realize that God was, all the while with me during that phase.
yeah.
And so for me, that was like something really, really special. Um, for me to go through, and I think, my hope is that it is a gift for the reader, that it's like, you know and this is the power of the medium of books, that I've always loved for myself, consuming books. But the thing that I hope, my reader will essentially get, is they'll be able to read their own story overlaid with mine. That it's like, in that way, it's like they'll be able to relate and say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, like I
Yeah.
can totally see, because I see God at work in your life. I can now more quickly recall and recognize where He's at work in my own life, and be able to sort of, put a memory stone, build an Ebenezer to that
Yeah.
work of God in their life at those particular moments." So,
Yeah.
that, that it very much has been. It's like I see God's own hand, in His writing on my
Mm.
life, and it's been, I've learned to recognize the handwriting, so to speak.
Oh, drop the mic. I have this little button here that when you say something really powerful, I click it and I have so many clicks. This- You're
Oh,
just
nice.
preaching, Jake. It's so good. I
Oh,
think I think that's the goal of every creative, right? Or every author, even where they're holding a mirror. I should say every spirit filled author, they're holding a mirror
mm,
and they're looking at a mirror and they're seeing the reflection of Jesus in their
mm,
story and
yeah,
in their present. And then what the gift of that book is a mirror to for each reader, like you said. And they're like, wow,
mm,
Jake just gave me language for why I value tradition, or Jake just gave me language for I am not who I was, and now I'm
mm,
reformed, I'm remade because of who he says I am. So
yeah,
I think the gift of handing someone that tool or that weapon, if you will, of just, gosh, true identity, it's so powerful and eternal,
mm.
right?
Yeah, and it
So,
takes a great deal of being. I think that is the power of being vulnerable in this way,
yes,
and that was like a real lesson that I'm personally taking away from this, because it's like, things that it's those uncomfortable parts of your life that you look back on and you'd rather not share with the world.
for
That it's like,
sure.
when you do lean in, it's like those are the parts that, like people say, "I can't tell you how much that meant to me, and I can't tell
Yes.
you how much that like that spoke to me in my own life,
Yeah.
and made me feel like, it not only not only did it connect with them in that way, but it redeemed something in them." And I think that that's not my effectiveness as a writer, that's God's effectiveness as the redeemer,
Yes.
is like, is he
Come
is
on.
working and weaving through all of our lives to just, that it sort of has this kind of snowballing redemptive factor to it, where it's
Yes.
like, where it just opens your eyes and, renews your heart, when it's like you can see God's redemptive power at work in
Yes.
somebody else's life, and you recognize it.
Yes. What while you're talking, what keeps coming through my mind is it's the blood of the lamb and the power of testimony, right? And so just
Absolutely.
that, it's like I was thinking about this a couple days ago. Someone said I was at a women's conference, and someone said, kind of like, "What do you do?" And which is kind of a you're like, well, where should I start? And they're like, what
Right.
have you gotten? How have you gotten to where you're at today? And
Mm,
it's funny, as I'm sharing with this girl, you are stringing extreme trauma and desert and wilderness and valley moments. I'm not telling this girl that I've never met about my victories. And then I did this,
mm,
and then I had this celebration moment. You're stringing together these vulnerable moments of brokenness that only
yeah,
God could restore. And
right.
it's like these shattered pieces create this beautiful display of him, right? And then you look at that and you're like,
Absolutely.
dang, that's his fingerprint.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's beautiful that you're handing people that gift to see the fingerprint of him in their
Mm,
story. And
mm,
so, my one of my last question, I'll leave it at this. Your work has so much history. It's just seeped in history. Every time, I mean, even since talking to you today, you've quoted multiple historians. Every time, this is one of my favorite things about your wife is that I think she has just chapters of amazing quotes just fully inscribed on her mind because she'll be like, "Oh, you know what so and so says," and then she'll say a quote, and I'm like, she's always quoting C.S. Lewis. She's always, and I'm like, man, this girl knows historical just truth. It's amazing.
yes, she
And so
does.
that is so evident in the things that are coming and flowing from your family. And so this love for history, it speaks powerfully to the present in the writing of your book. But how did you wrestle with bridging the old and the new as you were writing this book?
Gosh, another good question. Um, you know, I just as I look back, in history, and it's like, when you start reading some of these, like, some of these old teachers, they continue to point you further back. Like, C.S. Lewis, like, would say, like, um for every, like, new book you read 3 old books. And
Yeah,
so I was like, "Okay, well, he was writing the new book, so if that's a new book according to him, then what are the
yes,
old books that I need to go back?"
yeah,
And
totally.
so it's like, you know, you dig into, like, Lewis and Tolkien long enough, and then you're introduced to, like, their mentors, which are, like,
Yes,
Chesterton and MacDonald.
yes.
And so, I looked back at their writing, and I've been steeped in their teachings for so long that um, what I come to realize is, like, is, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme, is actually a quote from Mark Twain. And it's like the things that they addressed in their time, it's like we're still dealing with those. We are
Yeah.
still, working through those struggles. So it's like those lessons, um, still, like, um, are still very pertinent to the things that we wrestle with today. And
Hmm.
so that was my hope, is like, as I'm reaching back, it's like I always find these unbelievable, nuggets of history to, like, kind of bring forward and permeate. Hopefully they permeate my teaching, and,
Mm,
whether I'm speaking from stage or writing it on a page, it's like that it is all there, and that really infuses my thought. So, and I don't think that uh I don't have to work to make it more relevant. I don't have to, like,
mm,
edit it down or distill it or anything. It's a matter of living it and learning from it in my own life, that actually makes it relevant. And letting people see that, and how that really transforms and takes shape. And of course, all of these
yeah.
things, though it is the teaching of these old boys, of MacDonald, of Chesterton, of Tolkien and Lewis, it's all scripture anyway. And
Right.
so it's like, when you find that when you find that golden thread, it's like it is that timeless truth. It is the very living word of God, and let it have its life in me, in this in this old soul, and to constantly refresh me day by day, to turn me into a new creation.
Drop the mic again. Man, that's so powerful. What would you say to the person listening to this? That's like, man, Jake, I feel like there's an old soul in me, but I have
Mm,
yet to excavate or really search out that old soul. Um, and also, I feel something in me just aching to create, but I don't even know where to start. What would you say to
mm.
that person?
You know what? I would say, start anyway.
Mm,
You don't know where, it's like a lot of times we get hung up, and there's a lot of talk amongst artists that, it's like the intimidation of the white canvas. And it's, I think it was Matisse who said, like, painting is the easiest thing in the world, beginning is the hardest.
oh,
And
so
so it's
true.
like, just once you get past that, it's like once you actually just start creating, just start,
Mm,
wherever you're at. If Just engage with it, because it's like you can come up with a million of excuses to put it off, to push it down the road. You can kind of fall. It's very easy in our modern day and age, with all that there is to consume, to fall
mhm,
back into that consumer mindset rather than being a creator. And it's
right.
like, but and I think that is, yes, it's great that there are so many things to consume in this day and age, and so many things to inspire, but it's like you have to actually go put that to work in your own life. If you want to be forever changed by that, if you want to encounter God in your own story, then it's like start living your own story. And it doesn't matter how you begin. It doesn't have to be like beautiful or flashy or anything like that. It's like he'll meet you right where you're at, and with
Yes.
the tools that you have in your hands. And so I would say just begin. And it's like, don't despise those small beginnings. That's a verse that, is near and dear to my wife's and my heart. I mean, it
Yes.
is like, it is marked our lives in so many different seasons, that it's like it's just in that little act, that mustard seed of faith to begin, that it's like God starts marking out your steps.
Yes.
So
Oh, I love that. And it's like, what better tool to start your story with than your own story, right? What
mm,
better? It's just a weapon to
yeah.
be able to forge out. And um, while you were saying this, what came to mind is this. It's this withness. That's the gift. It's this Emmanuel, and so it's this like I'm going to create with Jesus. This is not. My
Mm.
mentor always says faith is not a duet, not a solo. It's a duet, and
Oh,
so kind of
great.
changing that
Beautiful.
experience with art, and as you create,
Yeah.
right, of like Jesus, I'm doing this with you. You're Emmanuelness, and it's the withness that's the joy, right?
Yeah.
And it's the withness that he starts to reveal himself in multiple facets that you're like, wow. And it's what was coming to mind also is this concept of the imagination, all these different historical beautiful heroes of the faith. They stimulated their imagination, and so
Mm.
that's why all of
Mhm.
their works, and that's what art does. It activates this. Anne Voskamp says hopelessness is the poverty of the imagination. And I think so often
Mm.
that hopelessness is what withholds so many people from starting, because they're like, well, I won't be like Jake, a master
Mm.
penman, or I won't be like Hannah, this beautiful, elegant creator of everything she And so just nipping that and being like, Jesus, attach my mind and my spirit to your imagination and fill my mind with other people that have done that hard work of binding their imagination to Christ, and look at what flew
Mm.
from their hand and their heart.
Right.
So,
Oh, that's so
yeah.
good. Wow. Now you're
Yeah.
preaching. Gosh.
Oh, come on. Oh,
Uh,
okay. Well, Jake, can you tell us where can people find your book? How can they pre-order it? Where can they find you and your beautiful wife?
Oh, great. Well, you can always follow along with my artwork at jakeweidmann.com. We do have a link there that you can pre-order the book. The book is set to come out middle of April, is what it looks like, and
Woo!
so you can actually pre-order now through Amazon and a lot of other retailers online. You can also find the jewelry that my wife Hannah and I work on together at everydayheirloomco.com.
Which I'm
And
wearing right now for people that are watching.
oh, beautiful. Nice way to represent. That's so
Yes.
great. And and yeah, we're on all the different like social media platforms. So just trying to get the word out any way that we can and share our
Yes.
creation with the world and what God is doing in us and through us.
Oh my goodness, I told you. Jake has such a gift and he truly carries such a heart of humility. And so, like we shared, make sure that you go and pre order his book. It is getting ready to release. This podcast is being released on, I believe, the day before his book actually is launched into the world. And so, you still have time to pre order. It is such a gift to authors when you do pre order, such a big help. And so, yeah, make sure you go head over to the link, it's in the show notes, and pre order Old Soul, New Creation. And as always, if you have a free second and you are able to rate this podcast on whatever platform you are listening to, it does help so much. And so, gosh, again, what a gift to have you here. I'm so thankful for every voice that leans in each week and that we all get to lean into all these amazing guests and get to learn from their lives. And so I hope this week that you just step out in boldness and just lean into Jesus in a way that you have not. And so, yeah, we will see you next week on the Let Me Ask You This podcast. Thank you so much for being here.